Three challenges of managing on the North Slope that you won't find in other places are the cost of doing business, educational levels, and the weather. Now, the one we can do the least about is the weather. Now, why does that matter? It's because, number one, you're going to have a harder time sustaining certain people, keeping certain people. Your turnover rate is just simply going to be higher because some people are going to come up, and the day, the night thing, the snow and the cold is going to be more than they can handle. And so when you're doing your employing, your hiring, one of the reasons you're going to want to favor people already up there is that you know that they're going to be able to handle it. Not everybody can handle Barrow. Barrow's wonderful. I love it. And I'm down here in Washington right now as I'm filming this, but I'm heading back up to Alaska tomorrow. And it's for me, but it's not for everyone. So one of the things that we need to understand as a manager is to take that into account, okay? Now, a lot of the businesses already do. Most businesses on the North Slope give an outrageous, wonderful, outrageous amount of vacation time because they realize people need to get out. They need to get away from the darkness. They need to get away from the cold every so often. And so instead of 2 weeks, you get 6 or 7 weeks, depending on the place that's hiring. So, and the weather, of course, is also, if you're worried about getting stuff in, it's going to cause flights to get canceled. It's going to cause people not to be able to get in. And that's another thing that it's just a truth, just a specific challenge of the North Slope, that if you're the manager, you need to think about these things. Second issue that we can have some effect on, but still not a tremendous amount, that's going to affect you managing on the North Slope, is the educational level of the North Slope. Alaska is one of the least educated in terms of number of BAs per 100, per 1,000, or however you're going to want to measure it. And the North Slope is among the lowest in Alaska. Okay, the graduation rate is 87% over at the school. The schools in Barrow, now there are schools in the North Slope district that have made AYP. Aniktuvik Pass did. Point Lay did. Koktovik, that was the third one that did. But most did not, including all the ones in Barrow did not. Okay? And what that means is the school, despite all efforts, despite all the resources, is not performing at a level that is considered to be acceptable in terms of what other schools around the state and around the country are performing. Okay? And that's going to affect the people to whom you have to choose from. That, they're really, really well-run schools in some way, but statistically, their performance is, not where those that run such things are hoping it would be. So you start off with a fewer number of people who with college experience and college degrees, something Milosevic is trying to take care of, something you are doing right now, but you throw in, schools that are perhaps a little underperforming relative to other schools around the state and around the country, and finding people for highly technical positions, highly skilled positions, going to be hard. I know the job that I first took at Milosevic sat open for 17 months. 17 months because there was nobody who had the specific qualifications needed for it. While that's a little on the high side, it's not completely unheard of. And when you're hiring, you're going to need to make sure you're doing everything you can to retain those who have those specific qualifications that are important to your organization. And realize that finding those, that you're not in Seattle or LA, where finding those people are going to be easy. Finding people with those highly sought after levels of experience and degrees and such can be difficult. There's just a certain set of people that you can't find in any sort of rural community, and Barrow, unfortunately, is no exception. So, when managing, when hiring, when retaining, when figuring out what you're going to do, remembering that the educational level, unfortunately, of the people to whom you may have to choose from may be something that is an impediment. That's not a comment on any individual, and that's certainly not a comment on society as a whole and the culture as a whole. In fact, it has absolutely nothing to do with culture specifically, but it is a truth among people that you're trying to hire. My experience in rural communities is that the best organizations collect talented people. And even if they don't have a great exact place to put that talented person yet, they hold on to them just because it can be harder. The pool from which you're pulling from can be not as educated as the positions that, and experience-wise, that may require. So, I'm trying to kind of dance around this subject a little bit, not be offensive, but statistically everything I'm saying is true. And it's no comment. I don't mean that as a negative comment on the schools. I think the schools are doing their best, and then the schools are overall doing a great job. But they have impediments too, and the fact is they're not meeting AYP as you would hope they would do. Okay, the third one is the cost, and we're talking about cost of supplies, AC, Spenards, but also the cost of your employees. Okay, nothing can be done for cheap. Everything has a cost of living. The numbers I've seen is that the cost of living in Barrow, whatever you're purchasing, is going to be around 80% higher than it is everywhere else. Now, how is that going to impact you as a manager? You have to take that into account. You have to take that everything is going to be more expensive than it might otherwise be when you're making your plans. Okay? If you have a chance to buy in bulk and buy cheaply, do it, even if you're buying more than you may need now. There are just, money is not an unlimited resource in any organization, and people make 20, 30, 40, 50, 70, 100% more up in Barrow than they do other places. A gallon of milk is $10. I'm standing outside of a place where I can buy it for $3. Does that make Snohomish, Washington better? No, it doesn't. I'm much happier to be coming back up to Alaska, but if I'm somewhere that's feeding kids and buying milk's important to me, I've got to take these things into account. So there are specific challenges to Barrow that you just are going to have to take into account. Now, our book, 50 Years from Tomorrow, talked about a different set of challenges that William Hensley encountered too, that some are still there, some are not. There's still some racism, of course, that is there, in that, and more than just racism, it's just that people who are making decisions about the North Slope have never been to the North Slope. They have no idea what they're talking about. I know that, this isn't a North Slope story, this is a YK Delta story, but when they first passed the education reform, they tried and invited and finally succeeded in getting Tommy Thompson, who was at that point the head of the Department of Health and Social Services, to come see the specific challenges they had in the LKSD, Lower Kuskokwim School District, that as far as getting highly qualified teachers. And it's like you have to come see where these schools are in order to make to understand the challenges. And so they did. They finally got him to come out. He went and visited some village schools out there, and sure enough, all of a sudden, the YK Delta and actually other rural communities in Alaska were given a free pass, basically, on some of the things that the new legislation was requiring, just because it would be impossible to do so. I teach I've taught right now in a well, not right now, but I've taught in the past in a school that only had 13 students. Well, if you only have 13 students in the whole school, what are you going to do? You can't have 7 teachers. You only have 1 teacher, and that teacher is going to be highly qualified in something, but it's not going to be highly qualified in everything. So, exemptions have to be made in order to make things work. And so when regulations, when things that we would like to see happen don't happen, it's in part because they just don't get it. I mean, there probably is some racism there too, but mostly it's just an ignorance from having never laid eyes upon what they're having to deal with. Um, and then there's just different goals. Um, the goals of the North Slope, the goals of the people that live on the North Slope, don't necessarily fit the goals of the lower 48. And the people in the lower 48 don't always understand that. It's a different world, different expectations, different desires in life. Subsistence hunting is just not a big thing in the lower 48, for example. And so another thing you're going to have to deal with and be able to work with is just the understanding that the rest of the world isn't seeing it because they just don't know. It's just an ignorance about your particular environment that they're going to have. So that kind of brings it, to the end of the specific challenges of the North Slope. But I invite you to think about other challenges you think that come from the North, that living on the North Slope, that you might not have to work on in other places.